Come back up here. Come back up here. There we go. All right. Cool. We are live. Look at that. We're going to give it a couple of minutes, as always, and we're going to let some people start coming in. Still haven't figured out what I'm going to do with this. It's still stupid bright. I'm going to... So today's stream goals are... Those are seats. We got some seat brackets in here. Looks like. I think these just come out like this. We're going to give it a couple minutes, wait for people to start trickling in, as always. And do this. Got a seat bracket there. And seat bracket there. I really need to, I might need to grab my emery board here in just a minute, my little fingernail file, make sure we get all these little plastic bits out of here. But yeah, so stream goals are interior. Today we're working on the interior of the car, our model car. So that includes seats, obviously, door panels, again, obviously. I'm gonna try and get all of these off of here. And then we got that. Oops. Okay. So yeah, we got seats. And then actually I need to grab my base, like the floorboard base, just to make sure got everything correctly, make sure we're lining everything up properly. What are those? I think those are hubcaps or something. I might worry about that here in a minute. So it looks like interior wise, it's mostly just looking at our handy dandy little instruction manual. For the most part, it's just seats, seat brackets. Ooh, there's a center console, but that looks like it's chrome, so I don't have to worry about painting that. I'm going to leave out all of the little crits for the time being, just because, again, it's chrome. I don't have to paint it. We have this here. Aha, I see. Cool. So we have this here. This is our dashboard. And this is probably going to be the most time consuming out of everything, just because this is more like on the detailed end of stuff. So I think that's it as far as like pieces are going to go. We might try to, I'll keep this off to the side just to make sure I still have everything that I need. And so while we are waiting, maybe, here we go. And I had one fall. I still need to grab my paint and my paint brushes because I'm unprepared as always. But for the most part, I think that's it interior wise. I might try to get a little more detailed just because interior bits. Let's see if you can see this actually. So on the seats, it's actually got little lines in it where the like stitching and stuff would be, you know? So yeah, there's that. This is going to be like the rear kind of deck sort of that would go underneath like the back glass of the car. And then door panels, the whole thing is just on one piece because the doors don't actually open. So we have all of our little like window cranks and door pulls and armrests and cup holders and all that stuff. All of that's in here. And then this actually just glues directly to the outside of the body. So I won't have like, again, the doors don't open on this car. So I don't have to worry about like there being seam lines and everything. There's that. The seat brackets, while yes, it does have a seat back, I might just do this whole thing silver. I don't know. We might do this like inside part. We might do it like silver or black, possibly. I don't know. But then the seats, what I've got envisioned, because If you missed the last stream, we did our color reveal, and our color is like green. But I think for a really good looking interior, a like black and brown, like a kind of peanut butter brown. I really hope so. I bought like brown leather colored paint just for this reason. So I really hope this. I really hope this is what I'm after. Why is this so white? Let me see if I can. Is that closer? Is that better? I think so. A little warmer, cozier. But yeah. So on the actual seats themselves, you can see it's got like also the same little like stitching lines in there. And again, that's where the brown is going to come in handy. So I might try to stagger it. We might experiment with that a little bit. We'll just have to see where the wind blows me, I guess. But yeah, so it's going to be silver seat backs with possibly like black in here. We're going to have our black and brown seats that sit inside of this. We're not going to be doing any gluing today just because we're not doing any assembly. We'll save that for next stream because then that's when the car will really start to come together. So we're just focusing on painting for the time being. But yeah, it's going to be seat back. Same thing on this one, seat and seat back. There. Oh no. Oh my God. Okay. Seat and seat back. Okay. We have our little dashboard with our, I might switch you back to white. That is so bright. But yeah. So we have our little dashboard. You can see the little pedals in there. And then it's got its teeny tiny little gauges, teeny tiny little radio in there. And we will just try to let's see how detailed we can get this today. It's got its own little glove box. We'll make sure we get the little keyhole silver in there. So the dashboard's going to go up here. Back seats, those just clip on there like that. Door panel, and then our teeny tiny little steering wheel. It's got a little steering wheel in there too. So we're going to come in here really quick, like this, and just simply ask, how is everyone tonight? Question mark. And who is your hero? Bang. So if you'd like to pop in chat a little bit and tell me how your night's going or how your week went, because again, I haven't seen you guys since last week. Turn this back to cozy setting. Hopefully this will die down at some point because I still haven't gotten my curtains up and this is so freaking bright. I never remember how bright it is. But yeah, so I'm gonna grab paint really quick and paint brushes. We might try and see if we can dabble with the white a little bit as well. We'll need silver, black, brown. Here's for our interior. Here's our interior brown. Again, I'm going to try and go for like almost a peanut butter kind of tone. And then we might need red a little bit as well. We're not doing any gluing, so we'll leave glue out for the time being. There, brush, big brush, bigger brush. Doing the hair tutorial. You just got to let it grow out, man. Genetically, I might be a little more well off than others because I'm just goated as far as hair is concerned. I wish I took better care of it, but you know, it's what everything. Brush, and then we'll leave that one out. It was a little big, but yeah, cool. So there's those. Get those out of the way. Let's get our paper towel and let's get started with our story time. So today's story is my automotive hero, Lee Iacocca. And Lee Iacocca is the GOAT for many, many different reasons. The biggest of which being, if any of you have watched the film from, I think 2 years ago now, 2 or 3 years ago, Ford versus Ferrari. You ever heard of it? Christian Bale? Yeah, Ford versus Ferrari. Lee Iacocca was a big part of that. So, Lee Iacocca was born in a town called Allentown, Pennsylvania. It's kind of on the other side of Pittsburgh. So, in Pennsylvania, his parents were actually Italian immigrants. So it was definitely a very like rags to riches story. You know, being born from two immigrants and you being like the first generation like American citizen. You know, it definitely was not the easiest start to life. I'm looking at this. Cut this really quick. I just realized this like. Does this clip together? Oh, that's tight. Cool. Well, that's going to make it a lot easier when it comes time for assembly. So yeah, the door panels actually just clip onto the dash. So, but yeah, so he was like a first generation. His parents were immigrants. They came from Italy and settled down in Pennsylvania, pretty much like fresh off the boat. You know what I mean? So they were raising him, and they actually had some family that was already kind of established here. That's why they moved from Italy to America. It's because they had family here and they didn't really want to be part of Italy in the 1940s. So if you ever heard of World War II, yeah, that's why. World War I, World War II, the whole Italian like fascism, all that stuff. Yeah, they didn't want to be part of that anymore. So they moved to America. And then Lee Iacocca was born in 1924. So this was right after World War I. Again, whole Italian like fascism, all that stuff. He was born October 15th, which no wonder I like him so much, where our birthdays are pretty similar. Mine's the 11th, in case you were curious. And then his dad was Nicola Iacocca, which that's like a powerful name in itself. And then his mom's name was Antonietta or something like that. I think that's how it's spelled. But yeah, Antonietta. And Nicola Iacocca gave birth to Lee Iacocca, the gangster. Yeah, of course. He's a Giga Chad. He's Sigma male of overall. But yeah, so he was just born and raised in Pennsylvania. He stayed there pretty much his entire childhood, graduated from high school in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And then he actually went to Lehigh University, which is also in Pennsylvania. It's in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I'm sitting here telling this story. I'm not doing any painting. But yeah, so he went to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania in Lehigh University for industrial engineering. We got to remember all my facts. But yeah, he went to school for industrial engineering. That's what he studied there. And while he was there, he started learning more and more about cars. And cars is kind of where he found his passion, you know? Now, he was a businessman over everything. He appreciated business and the art of business. Hello, mother. Welcome. I'm sitting here telling about my automotive icon. But yeah, so he was a businessman above all else. He wanted to create something successful. That was his goal. So when he graduated from Lehigh for industrial engineering, that's when he started like wanting to figure out what his career path wanted to be. And he specifically wanted to be in something automotive because he grew up in like the steel industry, being part of Pennsylvania. So growing up in the steel industry, he grew a liking for cars because of it. So with that, he then proceeded to go to Princeton for mechanical engineering and actually went on to graduate with his master's degree in mechanical engineering. From there, in I've got it written down, 1946, May of 1946, that's when he graduated with his master's degree. In August, he started his engineering career for Ford Motor Company. And to be specific, he went into the Ford division of Ford Motor Company. So Ford has its own individual divisions for each of its different branches. So it has Ford, and then there's Mercury, and then there's, Lincoln. All these are just sub companies of Ford Motor Company, which is the parent company. So he worked for the Ford division as an engineer. Well, they slowly turned him into sales, and that's where he boom, that's where the business part of him really started to stick out. So he stuck with sales for a while, and he started going to all these different dealerships around the New England area, mostly being in Pennsylvania, because again, that's where his roots are. That's where he knew the area. So he knew how to cater towards the blue collar audience that was in Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania was a very blue collar state at the time. Again, because of the whole steel industry that's in Pennsylvania, especially around the Pittsburgh area. So going on into the 50s, because again, he started working in the 40s, late 40s. Moving into the 50s, that's when he really started getting more and more into running dealerships, being lead salesman, being a sales manager for a lot of these different dealerships in the Pittsburgh area. And again, just all over New England. And that's when he started gaining national recognition for a sale that to this day, a lot of people talk about in the automotive industry. And it gets brought up a lot in marketing classes. I remember my marketing class last semester that I take in college actually brought up this sale that I'm about to talk about. So he started the 56 for 56 sale for the Ford dealership that he was working for. So the goal of the sale was, if you put 20% down on a brand new 1956 car, because at the time the flagship was actually the Ford Crown Vic. So that's the main one that they were really pushing. But of course, like the Thunderbird and stuff like that was also in the same era, 1956. So the 56 for 56 sale, the promotion for it was, if you put 20% down on a vehicle, again, a 1956 vehicle, you could pay $56 a month for the next 3 years and own the car. That was the terms of the sale. Was, if you put 20% down, you pay $56 a month for a 56 model year car. And the people, the bigwigs all the way over in Detroit, specifically Dearborn, Michigan, but yeah, Detroit, they started really recognizing Lee as a really good business opportunity, and they wanted to make him part of the team. So that's when they started pushing him towards the corporate side of sales for Ford Motor Company. Again, specifically the Ford division of Ford Motor Company. Now, after the 56 for 56 sale, again, this is, going directly from being a sales manager at just, these dealerships in the Pittsburgh area and just around Pennsylvania. Now he's working in corporate offices and actually climbed his ranks to be the vice president of Ford by 1960. So before the end of 1960, within 4 years, he went from being a sales manager to being vice president of Ford, which was a huge deal at the time, because going into 1960, that's when a lot of these really big projects that are, that Ford is kind of known for today, that's when these started coming about. And again, going into the Ford versus Ferrari thing with Henry Ford II, Lee was the closest thing. Light work? Yeah, I bet, Brenner. Is that why you only put out one? I'm kidding. You just wish he would have worked for BMW. That way Mini Coopers could have a little bit better reputation. But going into the 60s, that's when he was named vice president. So he began to oversee his first big project as vice president going into the early 1960s. So, a couple years into his vice presidency. With that, he was given by Henry Ford II, he was given the opportunity to oversee a project of a new car, just a completely new car. Because by this point, they had really only been pushing a couple different like sedans, the Ford F-100 truck, stuff like that. They hadn't had a new vehicle in a long time. So that's when he began the prototype process for, drumroll, the Ford Mustang. So in 1964 and a half, 1964 and a half, that's when the Ford Mustang came out. And again, Lee Iacocca was a big reason the Ford Mustang was released. He's the one that really oversaw the project for it. And to this day, fun fact, the Ford Mustang is still the highest selling sports car in America. It is the most sold sports car in America since the 1960s. There haven't been very many other competitors that have actually come close other than the Camaro. But again, the Camaro only came out from Chevy because of the Mustang. Because the Camaro didn't come out until 1967, 3 years later. So Iacocca really beat him on that one. From there, Lee Iacocca, given the success of the Ford Mustang, because that model went on and it has been one of the longest running cars in production. The Mustang has never gone out of production since 1964. So deterring a little bit, not going to lie, this steering wheel is a lot more difficult to paint than I thought it was going to be. Oh my goodness. Okay. But yeah, so going into the late 60s, that's when Lee Iacocca began, broadening the car market for Ford, because again, they hadn't really come out with anything new. So that's when, I got it written down here. So he regained popularity and remade, you made the Ford Hot Wheel. Congrats. You're basically Lee Iacocca if you make a Hot Wheel, essentially. Oh yeah, and of course, dude, okay, so keep making Magnum content. This is great because I'm gonna get to this in a little bit. This is like a big talking point, so stick with me, stick around for a little bit. The Magnum content is gonna be coming soon. That's gonna be towards the end of this live stream. But yeah, so before I get too carried away, that's when he remade the Lincoln Continental. You ever heard of it? The Lee Iacocca of the clothing game. Yeah, that's me. Shag and Wagon merchandise available at jessebussy.com. Where's my beanie? I had a beanie in here too. Okay, I've got beanies, hats, hoodies, all that stuff. Be sure to check it out at jessebussy.com. Thanks, I'm that guy. That's my boy right there. Be sure to subscribe to that guy for like best reactions in the game. My humble opinion could be the humble opinion of yours as well. But yeah, so he essentially reinvented the Lincoln Continental after it kind of died out in the 60s, or the 50s, the late 50s. the big cars kind of started to slow down for a little while. So he re-upped the whole like land yacht boat game. And again, because of this, GM had to chase the tail of Ford, and that's when they started coming out with like the Impala, which is what we are working on now. The 67 Impala that we are building, this car would not exist if it weren't for Lee Iacocca. That's why he's a freaking legend. That's why he's my favorite. Ford Escort, you ever heard of it? Yeah, that's Lee Iacocca. He was a big reason the Ford Escort gained popularity. And then he actually remade Mercury after it had been essentially dead for like a decade. Because of Lee Iacocca, Mercury restarted in the 60s and went all the way up until the 2000s, I think, before Ford finally cut it again. Hi, Leah. Hi, Leah. But yeah, so that's why Ford is such a powerhouse, and that's why Ford is the powerhouse that it is today, is because of Lee Iacocca. Him making the Mustang was essentially the best thing he could have ever done for Ford. Because if it wasn't for that, you know, they wouldn't have had the money to make all of these other things. If he didn't make what I'm going to get into here in just a second, which is the Ford Pinto, Ford wouldn't be nearly as big as it is today. So because of the things that Lee Iacocca put in place for Ford, Chevy then had to chase after, actually dislike him at first. No, he had to climb the corporate ladder. Yeah. So with that being said, I'm going to turn this down a couple clicks. Because of that, I'm not making any progress on this. I barely even have the steering wheel painted. Oh my goodness. But yeah. So after the massive success of the Mustang, again, to this day, still one of the most sold American sports cars ever, you know, more in sales than the Camaro, Charger, Challenger, Corvette, all of them. The Ford Mustang has done more in sales than all of those other sports cars that American companies have produced. And I think it's actually up there with the highest selling sports car in the world. I know it's close. Don't quote me on that one. But yeah. So with that, he then started looking for the next opportunity that Ford was missing out on. What is a market that Doomfoot, hello, Lee Iacocca was questioning, you know, what's the next market that Ford is not in, you know, because they weren't in the sports car market. So he made the Mustang, and boom, it's one of the highest selling sports cars ever. So he realized that Ford did not have a compact, fuel efficient vehicle. And the closest thing that any American car company had at the time was actually the Chevy Corvair, which it was in such a weird, should have been like Volvo and sent 1,000 cars to North Korea. I might have to double check on that. I'll look. I'm sure he's done something like it, 100%. But yeah, so he was looking at different market shares and realized the closest thing to an economy car that any American car company was making at the time was actually the Chevy Corvair, which the Corvair was in a weird, like, so the Chevy Corvair was a two-door rear engine, rear wheel drive vehicle. So it had a rear engine, like the motor was in the trunk area, and it was rear wheel drive, and it kind of got okay gas mileage, but it was supposed to be like a weird in between sports car / economy car. It was more of an economy car by fault, like Chevy didn't want the Corvair to be an economy car. They just made a cheap sports car, and it just so happened to be fuel efficient, so they decided, oh well, it's also an economy car. That's not necessarily how it works. So they decided, or Lee Iacocca decided, let's make a fuel efficient car going into the 1970s. And we'll get to the significance of the 70s, the early 70s here in just a second. But essentially, his goal with making, again, a new car for Ford was he wanted an economy car that was less than 2,000 pounds, which is, put the audio recordings of these on Spotify. I've actually wanted to dabble with that, so trust me. However, if you'd like, all of my live streams are actually in a separate playlist on my YouTube channel. So if you go into my YouTube channel, you can actually put all of my live streams are in that playlist. So you can just go back and have them playing in the background or something and give me that juicy watch time. You're more than welcome. But he wanted to make a car that was less than 2,000 pounds for under $2,000. 2,000 pounds for under 2,000, or under 2,000 pounds for under $2,000. That's what his goal with the Ford Pinto was. Now, the Pinto was finally released on like razor thin margins for the 1971 model year. So it was released in 1970 as a 1971 model car. So they start pushing the Ford Pinto, and it is a huge success because the same time that the Ford Pinto came out was about the same time. It was like right after the Honda Civic and Toyota Corolla and stuff started coming to America. So you had, and then same thing with like Volkswagen Beetle, the Mini Cooper, all these other teeny tiny little compact cars were starting to come to America. And so that's when Lee was like, okay, we need an American one, because America in the 1970s was very like, hoorah, go Merca, but yeah. So he knew people wanted an American economy car. So that's when he made the Ford Pinto. So with him making the Ford Pinto, it was a huge success. And because of that, they could spend more money developing other cars. So that's like when the Ford Mustang Mach 1 came out, and all the, that's when the collaborations with Shelby, Carroll Shelby, really started to explode, was in the late 60s, early 70s. And the success of the Ford Pinto was basically the part that like catapulted Ford into these other big projects. It's kind of the same thing that a lot of sports car companies are starting to do now. But they're doing the same thing except with SUVs. So you have like Lamborghini, Bentley, Ferrari, all these people are making SUVs because if they sell a bunch of these SUVs, they have a lot more money to spend on the development of sports cars. So that's why we have the Ferrari SF90, and that's why we have the newer Lamborghini Revuelto that's coming out. That's because Lamborghini has gotten so much money from the Urus, the Lamborghini Urus. They've gotten so much money from that, they're able to use that for the development. So that's what Ford did with the success of both the cheaper Mustang with, the crappy little inline six, because everybody wants the V8 Mustang, but they decide to, hi, Stephanie, welcome. But they wanted to, sell these cheaper models because people really look up to these. It's like a halo car in a sense. So they were able to use that success to then fund the fun things, taking a step back from Lee Iacocca for a second. The only thing I've done in the past 34 minutes is this steering wheel. And so we have to kick it up a notch here. But I don't really know what I want to do as far as like this dash is concerned. I might try and do. Here's what I'm thinking, and you guys are more than welcome to chime in, okay? But I'm thinking, obviously, pedals are going to be black, and then I might try and do the hardware for it silver, but I'll probably just end up doing it in black because it's black on most cars. I'm thinking I try and do my brown around here, or no. Here's what I'm thinking, okay? I'm thinking I do black on the dash, okay? I do black on the front of it, up and around the instrument cluster. I'll do the gauges either like red or silver. The glove box will be brown, and then the top will be brown. I think that might be the move. So I'm gonna go ahead and continue with the black on all of this underneath. Like I said, radio and HVAC controls, because it's even got teeny tiny little HVAC controls in there. I don't know if you can see that. It's not going to focus because it's too busy focusing on me. It needs to stop focusing on me. I'm going to scooch out of the way, see if it'll focus. But you can see it's got its own little, like, you can kind of see it in there. But yeah, it's got its own little, like, gauges and radio and all that fun stuff. So I'll do black around that. Gauges and radio are going to be silver. I'll do brown on the glove box and brown up top. Cool. That's the move. So moving on from Lee Iacocca. After, it's starting to get sticky on me. Don't get sticky on me. No. Hiya. Okay. So after the success, the massive smash success of the Ford Pinto, he had been with Ford Motor Company for a little over a decade by this point. You know, he's been working with all these dealerships throughout the 50s, came on in the 1960s for as vice president. That's when he got moved up to vice president. And then in where's it at? I've got my notes written down. 71, 73. Okay. Oh, yeah. I missed that part. Duh. I've got it written down right there. So the reason the Ford Pinto was such a success, again, number one, because it's an American economy car. But number two, 2 years after the release of the Ford Pinto was, drumroll, the gas crisis. So the gas crisis, to make a very long story short, that might be a future live stream. We talk about the gas crisis to learn yourself a little bit on that. But essentially, most of the oil industry is controlled by the Middle East. That's a very common known fact. The Middle East controls a lot of the oil prices because that's where a lot of oil comes from, you know, all these oil tycoons and stuff. So given the state of the world after the 60s going on to the early 70s, the Middle East was like, you know what? We're just going to make oil hella expensive. They've got to buy it, you know. They don't have oil themselves, not really anyway. Not nearly enough to keep up with, you know, the demand that's needed. They have to buy oil from us. Why not make oil super expensive? Boom. Gas prices shot up by like 4x overnight, you know. And so over the course of a couple months, gas prices went through the roof and people couldn't afford their big ol', you know, 7-liter V8s that got 4 miles to the gallon. As much as people wanted them, they couldn't afford it anymore. That's like if gas tonight shot up to $13 a gallon. I would have a really hard time driving my gas guzzling station wagon to and from work. You know, I don't blame them. So with there being a gas crisis where gas is like stupid expensive, people wanted more fuel efficient cars. Well, sitting here in the shadows is the Ford Pinto. And all these, American loving patriots were like, well, I don't want to buy a Japanese car. Let's just buy an American one. Boom, Ford Pinto sales through the roof. Bang, made Ford Motor Company millions of dollars, even though there was a gas crisis. There was a fuel crisis going on at the time. So the Ford Pinto that's the reason why the Ford Pinto played such a key part. Well, if anybody knows anything about the Ford Pinto, Ford Pintos have a little bit of a bad side. So people, after the Pinto was released, if there's a car, if there are people on the road, there are going to be accidents. It just happens. It's part of it, So people started getting in accidents with the Ford Pinto. And the problem with the Ford Pinto is because of the way the gas tank was oriented in the rear of the vehicle, it was in the crumple zone of the car. So all cars ever made, for the most part, amount of time and research this man puts into his work. I'm telling you, man, I'm not going to lie. I got a sheet right here full of notes just for this. But yes, a lot of this is just knowledge that I have. I just have a lot of stuff written down to make sure I have the order of everything correct. But yeah, so with the gas crisis, also here, quick disclaimer. Not only do you need to subscribe to Dat Guy for the best reactions in the game. Dat Guy, UDG, you still in here? Let me know if you're still in here. But if he's still in here, subscribe to Dat Guy. He's my homie. Also, subscribe to Cruisin' the 316 for the best wannabe BMW content, aka Mini Cooper. He's got a kick-ass Mini Cooper. It's pretty much just as fast as my wagon. Sub to him. He's gonna be on the channel. So is Dat Guy. So if you guys want to stay tuned for that, make sure you show them some love as well. Without everybody's support, this wouldn't be possible. None of this would be possible. Also, support me with Shag and Wagon merchandise available at jessebussy.com. Okay, going back to the story. When people got in an accident, the crumple zone of the car, which is where, no matter what the accident, that is where the car is going to crumple. It's for safety reasons, because you don't want to get in a car accident and your engine end up on your lap. Nobody wants that. So there's a crumple zone for a reason. Well, in the rear crumple zone of the Ford Pinto was the gas tank. And that is a no-no because gas tanks hold gas. Shocker. I know, right? So when they would get in these accidents and stuff, all this heat and all this metal crumpling up against each other all at once creates a lot of heat. You know what happens when you mix heat and gasoline? You get explosions and fire. So people would get in these accidents in Ford Pintos, and the Ford Pintos would catch on fire. No bueno. People don't like that when cars catch on fire. I don't blame them, So with the whole, Ford had to pay out a lot of money because of it, and it was kind of to keep the lawsuits out, because lawsuits don't look good for a company. So if you're trying to sue a company, they're like, hey, don't sue us. Here's a couple $1 million. Just don't sue us. And they're like, okay, cool. Sounds good. So they had to pay out a lot of money to all these people that were injured and or killed in these accidents because of the Ford Pinto. So with the whole Ford Pinto problem that was going on, Lee was like, you know what? I think my time here at Ford is done. I think I need to broaden my horizon. I think I need to go on to bigger and better things. So, he started looking around, and Dodge was like, hey, Lee Iacocca, the guy that made the Mustang.
we're about to go bankrupt. So if you wanna help a brother out, that'd be much appreciated.
So Lee was like, dope, make me CEO of the company. And they were like, okay. So, sounds like how they tried to cover up the Bronco 2 rollovers. Yeah, same thing. Because with the Bronco, cruising the 316, I know you had a Bronco, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the Ford Bronco, the problem with the Bronco 2 was when it would go through the, like, I think it was called like the moose swerve test or something like that. There's a name for the test, but essentially it's like how quickly a car can be going forward and swerve around an object. Essentially what happened was the Bronco would flip over if you tried to go around something too quick, because it was a very top heavy vehicle. And fun fact, the Chevy Astro also had a really bad problem with that. So, but you didn't know about that. You didn't know about that one because the news wasn't like, here, check this out, you know. But yeah, so essentially the same thing. Essentially, yeah, say no more. But when Dodge was like, hey, you should come work for us now, Lee was like, okay, dope, I can do that. Oh, there's scratches all over this. Where did these scratches come from? Nah, whatever. Anyway, so Lee starts working for Dodge, and again, same thing he did with Ford. He essentially looked at the company and was like, okay, what part of the market has untapped potential? Where are you guys lacking? Because Dodge was a big time powerhouse in the 60s because they were the ones making these massive V8s inside of these teeny tiny cars that have all the horsepower in the world. That was the whole horsepower wars of the 60s. Dodge ruled over that. Same thing with like the big blocks. Dodge had a couple really, really big engines that they were putting in cars. A 440 cubic inch big block is like almost a 7-liter V8 or something like that. The guinea pig scratched it. I believe it. Piggy, damn it, Piggy, is scratching my frigging. I've got scratches all over my glove box now. Whatever. But Lee was looking at Dodge and thinking, where do you guys have untapped potential? Where are you guys lacking? And he realized that Dodge was still trying to hang on to the coattails of their whole like muscle car era. They're like, hey, we still make muscle cars. And everybody was like, gas is stupid expensive. We don't want muscle cars. I'm sorry, man. And so Lee looked at this, and that's when he began the process of making the K car. Now, the K car is essentially a fuel economy, it's a fuel economic car. But the cool thing about a K car is the K car is a whole platform. So he took his knowledge from the Ford Pinto, making an economic car, making a fuel efficient vehicle. Coffee. He used his knowledge of making a fuel efficient vehicle and looked at it and was like, okay, we can take that and expand on it by making this a whole platform. So what he did with the K car is the K car was essentially something where it's just a chassis. Essentially, it's just subframes. That's all it is. It's a front and rear subframe. The front subframe having motor, transmission, drivetrain, all that stuff, because it's a front engine, front wheel drive vehicle. And then the rear subframe was simply just suspension. That's all it was. So they realized if they take these and make these a platform of a car and not just one car like the Pinto was, they could expand the platform into other things. So that's when making the K car turned into the Plymouth Reliant and the Dodge Aries. Yeah. So that was for the 1981 model year. And if you picture in your mind, like the 80s, like retro wood panel, crappy little economy cars, that was the K car. That's Lee Iacocca, again, showing his genius in all of this. Oh my goodness. I almost need. No, this is the smaller one. Okay, I'll figure it out. But yeah, so he made the K car, and he made the Plymouth Reliant and the Dodge Aries, which then also turned into the Chrysler Imperial, which was the Chrysler flagship. Picture the ugliest car known to man. Yeah, pretty much. But guess what? It sold because people needed cheap economy cars to get to and from work. It's an economy car. It's not supposed to be pretty. It's not a good looking car. Trust me. Thank you, Brenner, for pointing that out. But yeah. But when people just need point A to point B, I just need to get to work. I just need to take my kids to daycare or whatever. That's what they needed. And so that's when the K car really showed its potential, because then he turned that into the Chrysler flagship vehicle, meaning it's the head of the fleet. That's the one that's on the showroom floor of every Dodge dealership, was the Chrysler Imperial. But the Chrysler Imperial was still a front engine, front wheel drive vehicle because it was on the same platform as these other economy cars. So after Chrysler killed the Chrysler, there was a technical name for it, but it was essentially the Chrysler 300. That was what it was called, was the Chrysler 300. Just a big old boat 4-door sedan. So Lee also made the Chrysler Imperial so that Chrysler could have a flagship vehicle that people could look up to, because people really like to do this thing where it's like, oh, well, they would buy a Plymouth Reliant and they would be like, but it's basically a Chrysler Imperial. I mean, it's the same thing. It's the same platform. It's basically a Chrysler Imperial. It's kind of the same thing that a lot of like old school like hot rod guys, they'll get any like small block Chevy and they'll be like, oh, it's got a Corvette motor in it. No, it doesn't. No, it does not. But it's the same thing. People like to do that because it's a halo car. It's the flagship model. My brush is getting sticky and it's not letting me. I should have washed it out. I should have grabbed a lot of stuff. I should have prepared for this live stream a little bit better. But yeah, there we go. But yeah, so we made the Imperial. Well, then from there, from there, there's 5.3 Silverado. Yes, it's the same thing. It's the same. Oh, that was a little violent. I apologize. But yeah, the Silverado guys, that's another prime example. People with like Chevy Silverados or something, they'll have the 5.3 Vortec or whatever in their truck because that's the cheapest V8 that Chevy makes. They'll sit there and talk about how, oh, well, it's basically a Corvette motor. It's basically an LS. No, it's not. It's so much different. But people like that. People are more likely to buy a Silverado that has a Vortec motor so that they can say it basically has a Corvette motor in it, rather than buying the cheaper one that doesn't have that option. So, yes, that is a perfect example. Thank you very much. It's like when people with Mini Coopers say that their Mini Cooper is basically a BMW. Right? But yeah. So he used the K car platform going into the late 80s after the success of the Dodge Aries and the Plymouth Reliant. He used that platform to make the Dodge Caravan and the Chrysler Town and Country, one of the most successful minivans ever made. He is an automotive genius, and he can see the untapped potential of almost any car, but it has the reliability as a BMW. Might as well be, pretty much. and the parts prices of a BMW as well. But yeah, so he used the K car platform again because you just make a different body and put it on top of the same thing. That was the genius of the K car as a platform. So they were able to take that front engine, front wheel drive platform, take off the regular four-door sedan body, and put on a minivan body. So then they had this whole other market that had not been done yet because the SUVs had died out by this time because the SUVs never really took off. The SUVs were only really popular with like businesses and stuff because it was essentially a truck with a truck chassis with more space in the rear that you could haul things in. That's where the like Chevy Suburban and stuff really gained their popularity. So they were able to make the minivan after the death of the station wagon because people weren't really wanting station wagons anymore because station wagons were starting to get old. Station wagons had been around for 30, 40 years by this point. And so it's the same reason why people don't want to buy minivans anymore. It's because minivans have been around since 1981 and, you know, their grandma had a minivan, or maybe your parents had a minivan when you were younger. So you don't want a minivan because that image is still stuck there. So now you're getting an SUV because you don't want a minivan. That's the same thing that Lee Iacocca did with the minivan because people didn't want station wagons anymore. So yeah, he used the K car platform to make the Dodge Grand Caravan, or I think it was just called the Dodge Caravan. So he used that success again. He was very, very big on reinvesting. So if you make money, you don't take that money to the bank and be like, cool, job's done, on to the next thing. No, you take that money and you put it into the next project so that you can continue to grow. That's why he's a genius as far as business is concerned. I'm gonna move this backwards just a hair. That look better? Maybe a little bit. Let's see if I can turn you up a little bit. Bang. Yeah, sure. Cool. Look how bright this is now. But yeah, he was very big on reinvesting. So he took the money that was made from the Grand Caravan and he bought a company that some of you may know, some of you may not know, called AMC, or American Motor Company. Now, American Motor Company was kind of its own brand, like kind of sort of its own brand in like the 60s and 70s, but they had kind of died out, but they were kind of supported by Dodge, but they were still separate from Dodge. It's kind of like America's Puerto Rico, like Puerto Rico is its own country, but it gets a lot of help from the US. It's the same thing with AMC. AMC was its own company, but it got a lot of help from Dodge. You know what I mean? So he took the money that was gained from both the regular K car with the Plymouth Reliant and the Dodge Aries, and the money that was also gained from the minivan, and he reinvested that and bought AMC. He purchased AMC. Now, the cool thing about purchasing AMC in 1987, when he bought AMC in 1987, it came with a little company named Jeep. The reason Dodge owns Jeep and the reason Jeep exists and is as big as it is today
is because of Lee Iacocca.
So he was able to take Jeep and, take that money, reinvest it, buy Jeep, and Jeep was in the middle of making their own SUV because Jeep wanted to go into this untapped market of SUVs because, again, everybody was making station wagons at the time until Lee Iacocca came up with the concept of the minivan. So they wanted to spring off of the idea of the minivan and make an SUV. So they were working on the Jeep Grand Cherokee. right? Yeah. And the Jeep Grand Cherokee is still a huge success to this day. So Lee Iacocca was able to take this concept of the SUV with the Jeep Grand Cherokee, and he was able to um, kind of expand off of the idea of the minivan, the practicality of a minivan, what people liked about minivans, what people didn't like about minivans. And the only thing that people didn't really like about minivans is it was a very city focused thing. People that are in rural towns or people that live out in the countries don't really want minivans because it was a front engine, front wheel drive vehicle. It's kind of hard to get where you're going with a minivan. So he took the next couple years and really started expanding off of this idea of an SUV, but without the truck qualities. You know, he didn't want the harsh ride. He didn't want the bare bones interior that trucks were kind of known for at the time. And he wanted a nice cushy interior like he did with the minivan. He wanted a nice car focused interior, but the exterior and the practicality of an SUV slash truck. You know what I mean? So he then proceeded and made the Jeep Grand Cherokee. It made its debut in 1992 for the 1993 model year, the same year that he retired. So he retired in 1992, and as his final send off, he released the Jeep Grand Cherokee. And like I said, the Jeep Grand Cherokee is still a massive success to this day. You can't drive by a Dodge dealership without seeing the Jeep Grand Cherokee or a Dodge Durango. And the only reason the Durango exists is because of the Jeep Grand Cherokee. See where I'm going with this? So a lot of the things that are in place today are because of decisions and actions that Lee Iacocca took in the 60s, the 70s, and the late 80s, going on into the 90s when he retired finally. So he retired at the age of 68 years old. So by the time he was 68, he had created the Ford Mustang, the most successful sports car ever. Beat Ferrari in the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and turned it into one of the biggest underdog stories of all time. So much so that they made a movie starring Christian Bale, saved Dodge from bankruptcy, and turned it into the company that it is today, including the whole Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram organization that it is now. So that is my story on Lee Iacocca. I have made no progress on this project car because this is a very near and dear story to my heart. I really enjoy this story. And I actually learned about it from somebody I've mentioned in a previous live stream. This was Regular Car Reviews. So they actually have a crazy good story on this. So if you want to check that out, just look up RCR Lee Iacocca. But yeah, so I'm going to go and call it from there. I appreciate everybody that came in, hopped in the chat, hung out for a little while. I've made zero progress on this. I might do a little bit off camera. But yeah, so here's this. I've done the steering wheel and part of the dash. So next to nothing. Oh my God. And now I'm losing everything because it's sticking to my fingers. If you didn't see it in the previous live stream, here's the color reveal. I'm not going to show you the full car just because I'm saving that for myself. But yeah, so here's from the previous live stream. This is why we're moving on to the interior. But you can see we got our whole motor, our whole suspension setup in there. And here is this beautiful green color. Actually, I can show you this part. I'm not going to show you the full car. Don't get ahead of yourself now. Hiya. But here's a better look. This is the green color we're going with. Keep up the Magnum build. You bought your own? Hell yeah, man. That's awesome. I've actually got some pretty good stuff coming in soon. I'm actually looking at my new car part right over here. So stay tuned for that. Again, cop yourself some merch over at jessebussy.com. here's our color again, in case you missed it. And then, long story short, the reason I have my Magnum, aka my YouTube channel, to the point where it is today, is thanks to Lee Iacocca saving Dodge in the 70s and 80s. So, but yeah, so that's gonna go and wrap it up for today. Subscribe to Dat Guy. He's gonna be in the chat over here, and subscribe to Cruising the 316. He's also over here in chat. But yeah, I will thank you guys for stopping in, and I will see you next Tuesday. Peace out, everybody. Yeah, there and.